Hey everybody, it's Alec here, and we're back at it again with another episode of the Smashing Brands podcast. And today I am joined by
Raeanne Lacatena.
Raeanne Lacatena. Thanks for being here, and I'm excited to have an amazing conversation with you.
Yes, same to you.
Cool. So the first question I like to ask is, how do you spend your time on planet Earth?
How do I spend my time on planet Earth? I am a mom and a business owner, and both of those are spiritual experiences. I
Yeah.
learn a lot about myself. I learn a lot about the world through the eyes of my children, and I learn a lot about myself and a lot about the world through the eyes of my business too.
Yes. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Where do you think you've seen the most breakthroughs within the last, let's say, 12 months through being a mother or through being a business owner?
The last 12 months have certainly been more on the business side of things than on the parenting side of things, although it is always a challenge to marry those two, to create harmony within those two. So they're
Yeah.
never really compartmentalized for me. I really truly believe that we are one person having lots of experiences, and so the more that we can just be one person in those experiences, the better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you feel like you're most excited about in your life right now?
So I have some incredible opportunities happening in the business, which are affording me the potential of traveling the world to
Hmm.
speak about the things that I love. And so it's doing this thing for me, which I've been craving, which is to move around and see more of the world. And to do that with my business and to take my
Yeah.
kids and my family along for the journey is really a beautiful gift all coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I know you're an author, you have some awesome books. What is it that you like speaking and educating people about? And how did you get into that in the first place?
So I believe that business is a brilliantly disguised personal development plan. The more internal work we do, the more outer results that we receive in our business, and that they're
Yeah.
very much connected. And the way that I learned about that first is that I'm actually a trained mental health therapist and a certified Reiki master. And so I come to business with a very different lens than a lot of the business coaches out there.
Hmm.
I see through the eyes of mindset, through the eyes of energy work, and through the eyes of strategy.
Yeah.
So for 20 years, I've been trained in clinical evidence-based practices about how to manage our internal world. And I was
Yeah.
given the gift of learning that through the eyes of understanding business too. And so I bring together the strategy side of things with how do we be in business? How do we behave with our mindset and the ways that we experience life?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And when I started my business and and I was trying to figure out how to get clients, there's always like tactic, 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 right? Do this, do that, all that. But in reality, it's like you don't necessarily need to do all these things. You just sort of need to become a different person.
You can, yes. Sometimes it's not necessarily being a different person. Sometimes it's just honoring who you already are. And
Yes, yes.
instead of trying to be someone else or try to fit into someone else's box, sometimes it's just about learning who you actually are and finding the strategies that fit you as a human being.
Yes, not a different person, but a higher version of ourselves.
Yeah.
So, what do you feel like for somebody that has been, I got to do this, I got to do that, they haven't maybe been prioritizing their spiritual life as much, really doing a lot of the deep inner work, where would you have them start?
One of the most accessible, easiest to learn and begin practicing spiritual disciplines is gratitude. It
Hmm.
is often underrated and underutilized, but it is very difficult to be pissed at the world if you're grateful. And
Uh,
finding those little moments, and this isn't just about saying thank you, which is a great place to start, but it's also about practicing what gratitude feels in the body and then
yeah,
expressing it from that actual genuine place of gratitude. It's so easy to use that as a first line of defense because, not to be cliche, but there is always something to be grateful for. And
yeah,
so learning that practice of gratitude, something simple as, three things you're grateful for in the morning, three things that you're grateful for in the evening, that reframe and the ability to learn how to feel that in your body and then express that spiritually that can be a great jump off point if someone is looking to reconnect with their spiritual sense.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, how would you say like you express that gratitude? Like you embody the gratitude? Because it's one thing to say thank you, but how do you really embody it energetically?
From a business context, maybe.
Or just
Um,
anything? Like, how does it like if someone's like, yeah, I wanna express more gratitude in my life, like what is the step-by-step plan or framework?
So one thing that is really useful, I mean, aside from the three pieces that you're grateful for in the morning and in the evening, which is a
Okay.
framework in
Uh-huh.
itself, the other way that you can begin thinking about this is to chunk it down into very small pieces.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, an example of this might be, sometimes business owners will get really wrapped into the high ticket sale and they only want to feel good when they're making a lot of money or that they're earning the revenue that they prefer to earn.
Yeah.
What about practicing generating gratitude for that one book sale, with that mini royalty from your book? Or
Yeah.
what about that one tiny product sale? And really remembering that the person who is on the other end of that purchase is a human being. And
Yeah.
maybe something as simple as a thank you note would be a way to express that. And so it's getting in touch with each individual element and learning how to express that gratitude to that, even no matter how small or great it is, really learning how to connect with the person, the human on the other line of that experience. Even if it's someone, who is not close to you, someone that you don't know, how can you
Mhm.
practice generating genuine gratitude in your body in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And you say it's all connected, the personal development, business, all of that. I've just lately this episode is coming at good timing because I've just been trying to find gratitude for the smallest things in my life. Like, oh, I got the smoothie. Thank you.
Yeah.
I finished this podcast interview with you. Thank you. I read this book. Thank you. So even things that aren't even tied to like a dollar amount or
Right.
something that might not even be a results driven metric or something like that, just finding little ways to raise my frequency on a compounding basis throughout the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It does. It does compound, it does add up, and it does increase the vibration. And those things are not to be dismissed or diminished.
Absolutely. So you've been doing this for, you said, 20 years, right? About, which is a long time. So what's something like what's the biggest breakthrough that you've had within like the last 5 years?
Probably. So, one of the stories that I wrote about in my book was a story where I shared that I had frozen on stage in a performance in front of thousands of people. And so one of the things that I did was I moved behind the spotlight, and so
Yeah.
I became less visible. I became more introverted. I stepped off the stage. I was fearful of public speaking. I was fearful of music and singing. All the
Yeah.
things that I really was planning on doing for myself. I stepped away from. And in the last 5 years, I did some of that compounding effort, in addition to some of the things that I teach on fear management, to be
Mm.
able to now be speaking in front of thousands of people. And to proudly say that I'm just not nervous anymore. I'm having fun on stage again. I'm enjoying
Yeah.
being in front stage in my business, visibility wise, just even personal branding, but also really the connection with more people and scalability and the experience of the messages that I have is really a huge breakthrough for me.
Absolutely. So that's awesome, by the way. Congrats
Thank
on that.
you.
So what was it that allowed you to get past that fear? What work did you have to do on yourself?
There were lots of layers that started with trauma work, actually, because that single moment in time became an identity crisis for me.
Yeah.
My young brain decided that I was a failure and that
Yeah.
I was an embarrassment. And I held that and let it layer on top of a lot of the parts of my identity. So it
Mm.
started with some traditional trauma work that I needed to do. I ended up using a modality called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's a mouthful. So I used a lot of different traditional clinical ways to overcome the trauma side of things. But ultimately, the decision that I am capable and ready and willing and interested was the real change point for me. I just decided I was no longer fearful. I decided that my fear was of lesser importance to the impact that I'm looking to create in the world. And so I decided energetically that it is done, and it is so. And so it is.
So how did you decide? How was
It
that
was,
decision made?
there's this pinnacle point in a lot of spiritual teaching. It's called self-transcendence. Are you
Hmm.
familiar with the concept?
I may or may not be. How about you go on?
Yeah, well, and the listener may or may not as well. So self-transcendence is this place where you get in your own evolution,
Hmm.
where you decide that even though you have to steward your own stuff, right? Your own fears, doubts, worries, human biases, programming patterns, etc., that
Uh-huh.
all of that work is necessary, but of lesser importance than what you are meant to do in the world in service to others.
Mm.
And so we do that work. We still have to steward ourselves and to continue, as you said, to become the greatest expression of who we are. But it becomes less about for us, for ourselves, and
Yeah.
more about for those that we serve. So we transcend the self in service to others. And that was the decision point, was that I was willing to get out of my own way in service to more people.
Mm. That makes a lot of sense. It comes back to this. I've actually been referencing this in a lot of conversations, but this idea that a lot of our root problems and fears actually just come from self-centeredness.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Humans are inherently selfish.
Yeah. Because it's like if we don't care about like what people think of us or how we're perceived by other people, there's really no reason to be fearful of anything.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Very interesting. So, who do you specifically like to work with, and what types of results are you helping them achieve? Because I know you have a broad spectrum of different things that you've learned, and frameworks, and strategies. But out of all those things, like, what do you feel like is your zone of genius?
The thing that lights me up the most currently, the type of person that lights me up currently, these are entrepreneurs
Mm-hmm.
who are at a stage in their career where they know who they are, they know what they want to do in the world, they have created a lot of success already, and they're ready to take it to the next level. So they are also in that self transcendence breaking point where they've gotten their success to a certain level, but they want to create more impact, fulfill a higher mission, a higher purpose, or frankly, create more revenue. Either one is fine. What their ambition is their ambition. My job is to help them be a steward of that next level in the phase of their evolution. I have a
Yeah.
lot of fun when those people are also spiritually connected, when they want to talk like we are right now about
Yeah.
some of those higher level experiences as well as the mission. I can help people make lots of money too, but I have a lot of fun when we're able to make a lot of money and make a lot of impact.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
One of my I guess you could call them friends, coaches, David Meltzer. Have you heard of David Meltzer before?
I haven't, no.
Anyway, his main line is make a lot of money, help a lot of people, have a lot of fun.
Yeah, all of that. That's where I am, and that's really where I do have a lot of fun. And when we're able to jive in that spiritual space, then I just feel electrified in the process of doing so.
Uh, for sure. So when you say people that have already had success, but they're ready for that next level, is that like a specific mindset? Is it like a certain revenue level that they're at? Like, how do you define like, hey, I've already had success and I want to go to that next level when you're thinking about the types of people that you want to work with? Like, what is kind of the criteria?
There's not a specific set metric in terms of a dollar amount by at all. It's really about an energy that they come to the conversation with, because some people, will come to my work and they have no interest. There's no drive towards the revenue side of things, and that's not a part of their goal set. Maybe they're having it all, or next level of success is being more present to their family because
Uh,
they've done a lot of that work to build the business, but maybe they've impacted negatively some of the relationships that they have personally, and they want to have it all. So their next level of evolution is finding a way to be very stunningly successful while also being successful at home as well. So
yeah.
one example. Another example is who is someone who is moving from solopreneur to entrepreneur is a common one that I will see, or someone who's been very successful in the corporate space who's deciding they want to build a business now and use their skills and apply them to the growth of their own thing with their own name on the door. That's another common one. Or
Yeah.
somebody who's ready and willing to break through an echelon in their business where they've achieved what they could achieve on their own, and they know they need guidance to get to the next phase and echelon of their career.
Yeah. It's interesting because when people look at success, like society's version of success or how it's portrayed in the news and the media, it's all about, money, what you have, what you own, all that kind of stuff. Well, there's a lot of other components at play as well. Like I know a lot of like very like rich, miserable people because there's all these other things that also matter a lot, such as like your family life, really important. Your health, all of that. And I feel like a lot people that have a lot of money, they might really struggle when it comes to their family life or their health, or they
Mhm.
might have their health and their money in order, but their family life isn't there. And it's very rare. I know a couple people, but it's very rare to find somebody that has all of these things in order. So, what do you believe is actually, I'll frame this question differently. For the people that you know that have all these things in order, what is it about them that they don't do that the masses do that allow them to be successful?
Let me see if I followed all those do's. What is
Like,
it that they don't do that the masses do? Is that
or
right?
that they do that others don't. I don't want to make this question too confusing.
So, what do they do that others don't? One of the things that they do that others don't is that I call it the balance of the masculine and the feminine in their energy. And this is that thing that we were talking about briefly, which is to
Yeah,
not just attend to the structure, the strategy, the revenue, the numbers, the linear side of things, which is very important.
yeah,
We need to have a riverbank for the river to flow. But then there's also the river, which is the feminine side of things. And this is inspiration, joy, fun, passion, connectedness, empathy. And
yeah.
so, what really successful people who have it all do is that they find the harmony between the masculine and feminine.
Hmm,
They're willing to look at the strategy and the riverbank as and the scaffolding, as well as how do I have fun in the process of doing this? What brings me joy? How can I rest and receive and not just provide for? And so
yeah.
they're balancing those two worlds constantly and openly having a conversation about how they can find the middle of those two roads.
Okay. So I like the analogy with the river because I think about flow.
Right.
So would you say these people are more often in a flow state? I think the answer is kind of clear. It'd be like, yeah, they're probably just more happy in general.
It's possible for sure. Yes. I mean, that's definitely a positive byproduct that happens when we are in harmony of these two. They are usually in flow state more frequently because they know what the flow state is. When we're
Yeah.
only in the masculine, we don't allow ourselves to experience what flow feels like,
That's
even.
feminine. Is flow
The
more
flow is,
feminine?
that's right. The flow and the inspiration, the motivation, that's the feminine side of things. And so, frankly, the people who are not doing both of those things, they're holding on for dear life to everything because they're trying to control more than is actually in their control. And so they're edging out their own zone of genius because they won't allow other people to support them, or they
Mm,
won't or they won't delegate to other
yeah.
people. They don't trust other people. And that definitely edges out that experience of happiness and health and wealth and that having it all phenomenon that we're talking about.
Yeah, so do you think it's like a lot of it's just rooted in childhood experiences which kind of like define who we are today? Would you say it's more nature or nurture actually?
So it is both always. In my mind, the answer to the question is usually both. It is very a social worky way to answer the question, but it is true. It is just well documented that it is both.
Mm.
I very much appreciate that your brain went right to this is rooted in childhood experiences, that we do form a lot of our identity very, 0 to 7. Womb to 7 is when we learn who we are by the messages that we're given from our family, from our environment, from our society, culture, etc. And there is some of it that is just, we do have a happiness set point. We have genetics, we have our environment that also impact it too.
Yeah. So, because I've read a lot of books, I've talked to a lot of people, and as far as I know, when we're born, we're pretty much like perfect. Like we don't have any of this crap. I want to talk to you about ancestral stuff eventually in this conversation. But
Okay.
like when we're born, we don't have all of these fears, insecurities, but through these first 7 years of our life, or whatever it is, when our brain is the most malleable, we start forming all these thought patterns and teaching and teaching ourselves to respond in certain ways.
Yes.
What advice do you have for parents that are a little bit more spiritually aware? Because it's like the parents that aren't spiritually aware, like they won't understand what they're doing, and that's fine. Whatever, parents do the best with what they can. But for those that are like aware of this thing, like you, for example, most likely when you became a mother, right? Like, what advice would you give them on trying to like raise their children to be the healthiest that they can?
As a mental health therapist and a Reiki master, to have the knowledge that your child's identity formation is happening from 0 to 7, speaking from personal experience because I have 3 children under the age of 8, actually. So I am very heavily in that world right now.
Yeah.
There are moments I would be dishonest if I didn't say there are moments where I don't use that knowledge against myself. And what I mean by that is sometimes I will say something or do something that I know has the potential of becoming a part of their identity and beat myself up about it.
Mm,
And so the advice that I would give in the process, because clearly if someone is listening and they're spiritually aware and they're curious about this, then they're aware of how they're being in the presence of their children as well. And what I would say is that while it can feel like enormous pressure that you are in front of these malleable little beings who are becoming themselves, you can either take it as pressure or understand that you're not meant to be perfect in this process, and that
yeah.
because that idea of nature and nurture is real, that there's this reality that each child is also very resilient,
Hmm.
and one thing that comes out of your mouth that you're worried is going to be negatively impacting them is not going to create their identity formation, and that
Yeah.
you can, just because that beautiful gift of malleability, maybe you did something that you're not proud of in front of your children, or you said something in a way that you're worried about. Know also that there's plenty of repetitions on the other side that can correct for that. So don't beat
Yeah.
yourself up if you don't do it perfectly. And I promise you with 100% certainty, you're not going to do it perfectly. And that's okay. That's a part of the child's development. That's a part of their spiritual, emotional, mental, physical development, that they need to learn that mom's not perfect, that dad's not perfect, and that they can recover and they make mistakes too. And so don't use it against you to know this knowledge that they're growing and changing in your presence.
Yeah. I think that's really sound advice. So I wanted to talk to you about the ancestral stuff. Do you know about the rat study?
Well, which one?
There's only one that exists now. It was something about how I heard it last week. I forget the exact specifics, but it's basically like rats that did things in a certain way, even when they weren't around like their grandparents or something like that, they still had similar ways of acting and stuff like that. So it was like purely like genetical, like you couldn't have gotten it from nurture. It was because these rats, I need to, I should have been more prepared to talk about the study, but basically it was like over time, even though these rats didn't all were all around each other, they all had similar traits that were passed on because of whatever it was, generational trauma or anything like that. Just rat study or not, like a lot of people, I say, hey, we're all born perfect to an extent, but things. there's something energetically that's kind of passed around through or passed on through ancestors in some way, or anything that you can speak on in that regard and like what we can do about it. Because I hear this a lot.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, there is certainly an entire body of science, even just frankly in epigenetics, the genetics, that are deeply ingrained in our programming. And we're learning more and more about the ancestral trauma and about, what is embedded in our brains even before birth. There's a lot of new research that is being developed in this area, which is really interesting and fascinating. And it is very difficult because human beings are complex to tease out and pinpoint exactly why someone is behaving in one particular way. And that's why I answered that question earlier when I say that I believe that the answer is both almost always, because it's not whether it's genetics or culture or epigenetics or ancestral trauma. It's that we are a soup of all of those things. And
Yeah,
so what I would recommend in the conversation of thinking about things like ancestral trauma, epigenetics, and genetics, it's what do I choose to subscribe to, and what do I choose to work on now?
yeah,
And that's that always learning, always evolving, always growing. That there's always ways that we can look at this differently and continue to strive to be the greater expression than we were yesterday. And so I would say absolutely there's a component that is ancestral and epigenetic. How much of it is frankly irrelevant, and whether
yeah,
or not this particular circumstance is cultural, epigenetic or not, you have something that you're currently faced with, that you're present to, that you want to look at. And so what is the way that allows you to heal and be the greatest expression now is really the most important question.
yeah, absolutely. And uh I did a quick search and it was the fearful memories passed down to mouse descendants. Genetic
Mm,
imprint from traumatic experiences carries through at least 2 generations.
yeah.
Fears can be inherited through the generations. The author
Yes.
suggests that a similar phenomenon could influence anxiety and addiction in humans, but some researchers are skeptical of the findings because of biological mechanism that has not been identified. But anyway, yeah, back to your point. Like when based on what you were saying, I think of like certain health things run in the family, like diabetes or this specific disease or something like that. But I believe that even if your family does have those sort of things, well, that could have happened because they were really unhealthy and they didn't take care of themselves.
Right.
So you can ultimately change the trajectory of your family in the future by just like being a healthy person. And because a lot of this is I feel like a lot of what people say are genetic, a lot of it is actually environmental, which I guess also could be genetic as well. But in the same
Yeah.
thing, just like with this rat study, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe if that is true in humans as well, there's some memories of something that I'm not even aware of. But like to your point, hey, if I do the personal development work, I take care of myself, I do what I need to do to
Right.
have a spiritual life and be connected to faith and be a great person, all that, then this stuff doesn't really apply. I can just not say it doesn't apply, but
Doesn't
mo
have to be a story.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's that same idea of I'm aware and now I'm making a choice with this information. And that's the beauty of malleability, is that we get to change, we get to transform. Even if we were handed down something that wasn't meant to be ours, that is ours now, now we're
Yeah.
aware. What are we doing with that is really the decision point.
Yeah, is there anything in your life that you felt had been passed down to you that you had to like say, "Hey, I'm going to change this"?
One that I'm working on right now is I believe, as an Italian American,
Hmm.
that one of the cultural, genetic, potentially epigenetic things that was passed down to me is that food equals love.
Mm.
Family in the Italian American or Italian
Yeah.
culture,
Yeah.
they shower their love onto you via the food that they make for you.
Yeah.
I went to visit my Italian family in Italy, and the amount of food that they put on the table was directly proportional to how excited they were to have me in the room. And it was incredible. The food was outstanding. I've never had a better meal ever in my life. But the
Yeah.
more you ate proved the more they loved you.
Oh. The
So if
more,
you chose not to have the food, was that a reflection of the love? And I see this in a lot of Italian families, in my own family. It's if I made this for you because I love you, and therefore I need you to eat it, and I need you to eat more of it. And so
yeah,
this messaging, which is, on the surface level, beautiful. It's an expression of love. It
mhm,
also gets a little messy when we start thinking about how we're, like, okay, I love you is actually separate than food, and that we don't need the two messages to always be connected. How can we love each other even without the presence of food? And how can
yeah.
we love ourselves and each other with healthy food and not just
Yeah, we
more?
don't need 3,000 calories.
Exactly. No, I don't want any more tortellini. And so learning how to say no to that love becomes
Yeah.
an interesting choice. It's fascinating. Really, it is.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when you're growing up, and I don't think this happens so much in my family, but in other families it's like eat everything on your plate. Like
Right.
you gotta eat everything on your plate, or else your parents are gonna get mad at you and you're not gonna be loved as much. And then
Right.
once people move out of their parents' house, they still feel, when they're not even around their parents, they
Yes.
still feel like they need to eat everything on their plate because subconsciously in their childhood, like if they didn't do that, there would have been repercussions.
Right. So that was passed on from maybe depression culture, during the depression times where you eat this
Yeah,
because if we don't know when you're going to eat again. And that's an example of, it could have been cultural, it could have been genetic, it could have been epigenetic. We don't know which one it is, and maybe it's a little bit of all of the above. And either way, here you are, you're aware now. What are you going to do about
yeah.
it?
And I just feel though, like even if it did take place during like the Great Depression or whatever, like a lot of people like feel compelled to like finish everything on their plate. I don't know, it
Mhm.
might be 50-50. Like for me, like if I'm full, like I'm not taking another bite. But I know there's some people that feel like, hey, they have to finish everything for whatever reason. And then it's like, well, that's just one behavior, you know? Like there's probably 100 others. You know.
Yeah, and a lot of them get mixed in there in the same way. Yes.
So, Rihanna, I have one last question for you. Let's say it's the end of your life. You've done everything that you've wanted to do. However, there's nothing, for whatever reason, there's nothing to show for it. There's no books, there's no podcasts, there's no videos, anything like that. But you have a speakerphone. You can talk to the entire world, and you can share three things that you know to be true about the world around you. What are those?
Asking the big questions, Alec Mountain.
Take your time.
The first one would be that love is the answer, as potentially cliche as that is.
Hmm.
It is a cliche for a reason. And the more that we can lean into love, the more that we can accept love as the solution, the more that we can express and receive love and be a beacon and a supporter of that is loving, the better things are going to be. And the good
Cool.
news is that even though love, that there isn't always loving behavior in the world, that love does outweigh in the vibration of hate. And so keep on being a beacon of love. Um, so this is a message for the world or so this is a speakerphone for everyone.
Yes. All 8 billion people or whatever it is.
Mhm. I really do believe also in this value of choice, that I believe there's always a choice. Even when it feels sometimes like we don't have one, I believe there's always something that we can choose to do or be or feel or have differently. And so find that choice point, that decision point that allows you to turn your experience, your focus in another direction, just as a message of hope that you always have a choice is something that I would want people to know. I feel that personally very empowering to know there's always a different way I can look and feel and think about this.
Yeah, you have free will, basically.
Yeah, the free will at minimum to think
Hmm.
what you choose to think and what you choose to lean into.
Yeah.
A third one. This is like we're winning the lottery in messages to the world.
Uh,
I guess I would say that while we have love, if we are a beacon of love and we have the choice, then we there's still hope. And I
Mhm.
know that a lot of people now in this world in particular are feeling like there isn't a lot of hope, or that they're struggling to find the hope.
Yeah.
But that is one of those loving choices that you can make for yourself, is that there is also hope.
Yeah. Well, that was fantastic. Very, like, coherent, makes a lot of sense, like, that was one of the better ones, at least in the last 10 podcasts that I've heard, so thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
So where can the people find you?
There is the website is called theintegratederentrepreneur.com. That is the name of my book, The Integrated Entrepreneur. I would be honored if you feel connected to the messages that we've talked about today. You're going to find a lot more in the book. So you can find that on Amazon, on theintegratederentrepreneur.com. And you can find me on all social media outlets at Raeanne Lacatena.
Amazing. Well, Rand, thank you so much again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.